Good morning. Well, hi. I was talking to them, but good morning to you as well. I've got Diego behind me, zonked out, hanging with his buddies. I've got a nice stay-at-home dog bomb cup. Delicious coffee. A couple of animals joining us. I think I'm ready. Let's see what happens. Reading about a long line. A long line. Mrs. Falala was not so excited about the plan. Move, Zora? Take my Zora? Is that he's not happening? But she would have company, I said. Lots and lots of company. Mrs. Falala waved my words away with one hand. I am the company of Zora, Mrs. Falala said. Me and Edna and Polly and China and Crockett. We are plenty company. Mrs. Falala sat on the hay bale and had become her regular seat for drawing with Luke. Patting the bale next to her, she opened her notebook and looked up at Luke expectantly. But, I persisted, look how sad Zora seems. Look how she hangs her head. Listen to those sad moves. That is not sad hanging head, Mrs. Falala snapped. Those are not sad moves. Those are normal cow moves and normal cow heads. I said, I hear Zora comes from a long line of grand champions. Mrs. Falala clicked her tongue and tapped her pencil on her notebook. You want to see grand champions? She said. Go look in barn. Pass the halters. Go on. You go look. Luke and I have drawing to do. Along a wooden rail at one end of the barn, near the halters and ropes and rakes and shovels and buckets and barrels. Hey, honey, where are you going? You want to hang out for the read aloud? All right. Apparently he wants to lay on the floor. Near the rakes and shovels and buckets and barrels hung a row of photos and images clouded over with dust and cobwebs. With a rag I cleared away the glass. In each was a Beltie, a young woman holding a medallion and blue ribbon. Grand champion. I looked closely at the woman and wondered if maybe they were all the same person, growing older. I returned to Mrs. Falala and Luke, their heads bent over their notebooks. That's you, isn't it? I said, in those photographs with the grand champions. That's you. Mrs. Falala said, I lie down now. Abruptly she stood and returned to the house, calling behind her, Don't take my Zora. A friend. When Beat and Zepp heard about Mrs. Falala's refusal to move Zora to Birchmire Farm, Zepp offered to bring one of his own heifers to Mrs. Falala's. To keep Zora company, Zepp said, to be an example for Zora. Beat chimed in, Oh, yes, you should send Yolanda, definitely Yolanda. Yolanda was smaller than Zora, quiet and sweet. She didn't bump us or slobber on us or whack her tail at us. We were excited to tell Mrs. Falala about this offer, so excited that we didn't wait until the next morning. We found Mrs. Falala walking up her drive, trailed by China, the golden fat cat. We told her the news, that Zepp had offered to bring Yolanda over to keep Zora company. Luke was clapping his hands to try and contain his excitement. But Mrs. Falala was not excited. She carried on walking. I am telling you that Zora already has company, and besides, who would take care of that extra animal? You think I want extra work? And who would pay for the grain? Luke and I stopped. We turned our bikes around, and then we heard a loud murr, and then more murr. Luke said, Zora is calling us, Rena. We can't just leave without saying hello. We left our bikes and walked up to the barn where we found Zora nudging her huge nose against a rail. Murr. It was a friendly sound that day, and when we reached her, she leaned her head against my arm. Luke patted her side. There, he whispered. Don't be lonely, Zora. We're here. Mrs. Falala came up behind us. Okay, she said. The friend cow can come by, but only for a visit, only a week or two, and you have to take care of it. You hearing me? Yes, we're hearing you. We stayed longer and cleaned out the bay and refilled the grain bin, and led Zora around the pasture and hosed her off and combed her hair and told her about the new cow friend, Yolanda, who would come the next day. As we were leaving, Mrs. Falala clicked her tongue and said, Polly will be jealous. The pig? Luke said. Why would Polly be jealous? Because he'll want a friend too, Mrs. Falala said. She turned her back on us and swung that long braid left and right and disappeared into her house. Yolanda arrives. Zepp and Beat and Mr. Birch from the farm brought Yolanda in the truck to Mrs. Falala's. Yolanda was all cleaned up for the occasion. Her fur shiny and smooth, her hooves clean, and her head and neck boasting a new green bridle. Zep led her to the outdoor pen where Zora was standing, munching on a bit of hay. Both Zora and Yolanda lifted their heads but did not make a sound. Zora flicked her tail. Yolanda flicked her tail. We stood by the fence watching, me and Luke and Zep and Beat. I looked back toward the house and saw Mrs. Falala at the kitchen window, but she quickly ducked out of the way. Zora seemed confused. Her head moved slowly, taking in Yolanda. All of us at the fence. She backed up. I was so nervous. I feared Zora would kick Yolanda or bellow at her or butt her with her big head. The two of them stood there and stood there and stood there and stood there. Urgh! It was so frustrating, so nerve-wracking, the watching and waiting. The mud ball emerged from around the back of the barn, Polly the pig, snorting and snuffling, covered with mud. He squeezed under the bottom rail of the fence and into the pen, and straight over to Yolanda, snorting and snuffling and sniffling, while Yolanda stood perfectly still. And then China, the cat, her back arched, her fur on end, zoomed into view and under the rail, circling Yolanda, while Yolanda stood perfectly still. And then Crockett the parrot flapped and squawked up and over the fence and onto Yolanda's back, while Yolanda stood perfectly still. And at last Zora moved. She approached Yolanda. She nudged Polly and China away, and she batted her head at Crockett, sending the parrot flying off. Zora sidled up to Yolanda, and the two stood there, side by side, making no sound. They just stood there, and stood there, and stood there. Training. For an hour each day, Zep joined us at Mrs. Falala's to work with Yolanda and to show me how to train Zora for 2 events at the upcoming fair. One event would judge the cows, and one would judge the people showing the cows. I asked Zep if the judging was done in front of an audience. Zep leaned his forehead close to mine. He said, "Well, you're not going to show Zora in a closet. You afraid of an audience?" "No, I am not. I just have no idea what to expect." "You don't think you can handle it?" "I can handle it, Zep. And even if I couldn't, I wasn't going to admit it to him." "You'll have to work really hard to get Zora ready and to learn what to do." "I can work hard, and I'll help you." My mouth flopped open like a thirsty dog. Zep smiled his slow, full smile and turned his head to one side. I was embarrassed down to the tips of my boots. I wanted to be able to train Zora right and show her, well, and I needed his help. We practiced out in the pasture, the heifers tethered to us by their halters. "Heads up," Zep said. "You and Zora. Back straight. Follow me. Watch." Zora was not cooperative. I tugged, I pulled. 3 steps forward, stop, tug, pull. 5 steps. She was being stubborn and ornery. Meanwhile, Zep and Yolanda moved on smoothly, walking a wide circle with no stopping and no tugging. Luke and Mrs. Falala were sitting on the hay bales, drawing. From time to time, they glanced up and then back to the paper. Zora moved forward and, mid-stride, dropped a plop of manure. "What if she does that in the show?" "They all do it," Zep said. "It's natural." "But everybody's walking round and round and stepping in it." There'll be pickers there. They scoop it up." "Well then, manure plops and pickers and scooping, it was natural, right?" The training was harder than I expected. Most days it was hot and dusty, and after coaxing Zora to let me halter her and lead her around, my arms and legs were weak with fatigue. Then I still had to tend to her food and water and clean out her pen. But the surprising thing to me was that I liked doing it. I liked the hard work. I liked seeing Zora respond a little more each day. I liked feeling stronger. Luke helped me with cleaning out the pen and brushing Zora, and I could tell that he liked it too. He wanted to be in charge of cleaning out the buckets and hanging up the brushes and halters. He talked to Zora and Yolanda all the time, letting them know that they were good cows, not lumpy at all, he told them. Luke was less afraid of Mrs. Falala now, too. He wasn't flinching when she sat beside him on the hay bales, and she wasn't barking so many orders at us either. Often, I saw her and Luke talking while they drew, side by side. Little changes, day by day. Rain day. One day, as Luke and I were halfway to Mrs. Falala's, the rain began pouring down in straight torrents from the skies, drenching us. Our shirts plastered to our skin, our hair flattened on our heads. We raced to the barn just as lightning cracked and flashed, and thunder boomed and rumbled overhead. We cowered in the stall beside Zora and Yolanda, who were lying side by side in the sawdust. It smelled of cows and rain and piney chips, and their fur was warm and soft as we leaned against them. And I thought I could stay all day, right there, cradled by cows. And I think that's a really good place to stop. It seems like Zora's changing a little bit. Zep is helping. We're seeing some hard work pay off. Mrs. Falala seems less intimidating or abrasive, if you will. I like when stories start to work out. People get to know each other and see the real person. I hope you're enjoying the story. I'll see you next time.